you interested in the paranormal, murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.
Hello, my name is Dan Hennen. Today is November 24th, 2018, and I'll be providing updates on the Crowley case. Crowley case updates. Tonight's episode will be called The Curious Case of Danny August Mason. Some interesting things have come to light here this last week, documents that have been shared with the group, and I'm going to put this into a summary format that'll be easier to digest for the viewers. Now, one of the main contentions early on with this case, along with David Crowley and the project called the Gray State, was whether or not there was a contract, whether or not there was a movie deal, whether or not there was a binding contract for this movie to move forward. And so we'll address some of that tonight. It appears that was the answer to that question was really, it's a gray area of what it really was. But I'll go through that tonight in certain sequences here. Let's get started. What we do have is that there was a proposal, there was a deal between Gray State, the Gray State Project, and MEG, which is Michael Entertainment Group. And this talks about the deal with the motion picture rights concerning an option, purchase agreement, deal memo. And so what we have here is a document given to us in PDF format that was really made or agreed on July 25th of the year 2014. So we know David Crowley went to Hollywood, I believe once in May and once in June, and now we get to July, and there's a deal in place. I had a previous interview with Mike Boggio III. He is the president of Michael Entertainment Group, or MEG as it's referred to here. He did say that they were under a deal. They did have they were working toward this production of a feature film or even a web series with Gray State. So we know a deal was in place. So let's go through this contract here. It talks about the option. It talks about the various rights. And let's go to the second page. I'm not going to get into the details. You can certainly pause this video and read it for yourself. But it talks about the various rights, the publishing rights, various bonuses, consulting fees, travel expenses, and so on. And then here's the final piece of it. Basically, the contract here is between MEG, M-E-G, and David Crowley for Gray State. Now, this contract, just to clarify, this copy that we've received was not signed. So we know that a contract was proposed, or a proposed deal here was on the books. The contention that we had was that we don't have any proof that anything was ever signed, and this also leads us to believe that still doesn't answer that question. Nothing here says anything was signed. This was just a file of the proposal. So we know David was working on a deal, Meg was working on a deal. Whether or not it was a signed contract or not is another deal. Now, since this contract, we also do have evidence that came to light from David Crowley in PDF format once again, showing the invoice from a law firm called Lohman Abdul, Minneapolis-based law firm. And so we see an invoice here at the end of July, which also makes sense. July 31st was the bill. We see the previous deal was, let's go back to the date, July 25th is when they basically agreed on the deal. Now we get an invoice from the lawyers, David Crowley's lawyers, working on the deal. And let's go to page 2 of the invoice. Line by line itemization talking about the dates of work being done from July 9th, 10th, 12th, 15th, various number of hours and what was being done and by who. And page 3 of the invoice, dates showing here July 18th all the way down to July 30th. Now if you look at July 25th, there's 3 entries there towards the bottom talking about revising and finalizing the draft between Gray State and MEG, the deal memorandum, teleconference, and the final draft. And so it's fair to say that David had a legal team, legal attorneys working on this deal. There was a deal, and legal team was involved, so sure enough, there was something in place. We don't know exactly what, but we've got evidence here to support that David Crowley was moving forward with some project. Now, the other piece of the puzzle, David had several companies he was working with and several companies in the state of Minnesota that he owned. And so one of them, he had to get the release documents of the other individuals that he had business relationships with. This one here is a release agreement between David Crowley and Danny August Mason. Now, this is page 1, basically just releasing his rights. This was a legal document in PDF format that requests Danny August Mason to relinquish his rights and release his contractual obligations to the Gray State project. And there's page 1, and here is page 2. And so we see that the location here for the date and signature between David Crowley and Danny Mason. Now the effective date is quite interesting here, and it's important. The date here, effective date towards the bottom, mentions August 1st, 2014. So his legal team writes up a release document as of August 1st to release Danny August Mason from any projects, because we know on July 25th, David has an agreement of some sort moving forward with MEG, and in fact, Loman Abdu was performing the legal work on that. The second one here is a release and waiver form also, and this relates to, if you look at the bottom, his business associate, Mitch Heil. And Mitch was involved in Hothead Productions, Gray State LLC, and in highlighted there is a company called the Bullet Exchange. And so it looks like 2 release forms were sent out by David Crowley, asking these 2 individuals to sign their paperwork, signature, date, send it back, and they can turn it back to the lawyers, and they would have their rights relinquished here. Now we know Mitch Heil relinquished his rights and sent it back. This copy does not show him his signature or date on this, but we know that they did finish this off sometime in the month of August, close the books, because there's the evidence of the garage sale David Crowley had at his Ramsdale Drive address in Apple Valley, selling off the excess equipment from the Bullet Exchange. So he had the garage sale and consolidated or closed out of that business and shut down the Bullet Exchange. And then by releasing the rights here for Mitch Heil on Hothead Productions and Gray State, left only David Crowley to be in charge of Hothead Productions as the sole ownership of that. And then it was David Crowley for Gray State and Danny August Mason for Gray State LLC were the only 2 left. So Mitch Heil signed off. He did it to save the friendship and shut the business down and to save the relationship. He'd known him from high school. So what we get next is a response from Danny August Mason back to David Crowley. Nothing happens in August. The effective date was August 1st to send this back. Nothing happened in August. Now we get to the end, toward the end of September, and there's a PDF file here that Danny August Mason writes to David Crowley. It's a little small here, but I'll blow this up. First, Danny says, I understand the agreement refers to Gray State LLC, and he talks about the difference is between Gray State, the Rise LLC. And he was not aware of this other business, and he wanted to clarify that as far as getting an understanding of what this release form relates to. Now, the release form relates to Gray State LLC. Gray State, this is where some of the other confusion comes in here, and I know we've got a lot of members on the page and in the group, is the Gray State, the Rise, was a separate entity, a separate organization, a company. They actually formed a company for the documentary. Gray State, the Rise, the documentary. Gray State here, just referred to as Gray State LLC, or Limited Liability Corporation, was the feature film, the full-length, fiction-based feature film that was supposed to be made, produced, and shown on the big screen, or perhaps in a web series. This was the one that the contract is for, is Gray State only. And so the first bone of contention here between Danny August Mason is clarifying which company. The second paragraph, before I can sign any sort of release concerning Gray State, I request in exchange that you sign documentation allowing me, quote, complete access and control to Gray State, the Rise LLC. You have stated many times before this project is of no interest to you. I would like to continue to work on this project with Robert Hoyt and produce a finished project for our fans. I request that you sign over ownership of the LLC and sign a similar waiver and release of claims that you are now requesting of me. So this is very interesting. This is almost a demand, or you could call this in legalese a counter offer from the first request that's being sent. A counter offer. Now he's also, he's asking for the Rise, which is the documentary. That David was working on toward the end. Now the very last paragraph says, I cannot sign the agreement, as in for a handful of reasons, but most importantly because I've dedicated 4 years to Gray State. I have been intimately involved in the creating, casting, development, production, and marketing of the project to this point. I invested my time and energy, often at the expense of my job and financial security, with the understanding that eventually I would receive compensation. Though I have received nominal compensation, I believe that I'm rightfully entitled to 10% of the gross revenue of whatever may be generated from Gray State moving forward. I would request that documentation be executed prior to me releasing any other claims or rights I have. And so this is back on that September 26th response memo from Danny August Mason to David Crowley. So the first, when we're talking numbers about this Gray State movie or feature film, it has come up before that part of the plan was that it would potentially be a $30 million budget film. And so this is the value of everything in the project. This is the mother lode. The Gray State project, the Gray State movie, the feature film, has a value, an asset value of one could argue $30 million. And Danny August Mason is not going to sign this away too quickly, knowing he's put in 4 years and has been very dedicated to this project. He's pointing it out here that I'd like to have at least 10% of whatever gets done with it. And so he's basically saying, I cannot sign the agreement. And so that was another question. We wondered if Danny August Mason ever signed it, ever sent it over, ever forwarded it back to the attorneys, or did he never sign the document? So I believe here that he never signed it. As it says, clearly states here that I cannot sign the agreement. Now, if we look at the timeline There's an email correspondence back and forth between Danny August Mason and David Crowley, going back to September 29th, and then a response on, I have it highlighted, December 9th, and then the final correspondence on December 16th of 2014. Remember, the bodies, according to police, they think the bodies were, all three were found deceased on December 20, were probably December 25th or 26th. The bodies were found by neighbors on January 17th of 2015. But now this is coming up to the week before, and they still haven't had this resolved. So I'm going to go through each of these responses here in timeline format. And so the very first one was on September 29th. Danny August Mason wrote, David, I apologize. I apologize for not getting this to you this weekend. Was busier than anticipated. Now this makes sense. His memo, his response memo, was dated December 26th, which was a Thursday. Danny Mason was obviously busy on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday he gets to sending this out in the form of an attachment, his response. Now this is the end of September, so I think David was hoping all this would be wrapped up in August, like it was with Mitch Heil. And now we get to the end of September. Still nothing. On December 9th, David writes to Danny saying, in deference to your hesitation to sign the Gray State release document, I give you these verbal guarantees. You will have A, full producer credit on the film The Rise, an unpaid position. And that is The Rise. Once again, this is the documentary, which he wanted to move forward with anyway. And B, letter B, was guaranteed casting as lead role in Gray State series, paid. So he's saying this not in legal, but basically giving his word. A verbal guarantee is all that this is. And Danny August Mason, I don't believe is going to be believing this, because I think at this point he's already under the assumption that he's being thrown under the bus, or in a sense double-crossed on this deal. And now we get into some very interesting chess moves that are being done here between these two individuals. So he's going to have him full producer credit on The Rise, which is fine. And then, by the way, we're going to move forward with this Gray State series. You can be cast as the lead role, which is a paid position. But he still says, I'd like to have this done. I'd like to have the release finished. You'll have every opportunity to continue to collaborate, he says, writing and producing episodes and retaining your cherished position as a co-creator of the original concept in the public eye, but I'll not be able to sign you on to any contracted roles until I have your signed release document. I would like to have it by December 16th, after which we would be free to discuss a future with Gray State that's more respectful to your talents as a paid professional. Now this is a kind of this is the shot across the bow here, letting him know that he means business. He gives a deadline, a hard deadline of December 16th. And also says that if it's not back by then, the most you'll ever be as a paid professional, or in a role as an actor only. And so Danny August Mason puts 4 years of his time into this. Always has said he wanted to be the co-creator of the original concept. But until he signs this, he's not going to be anything. So this is December 9th at 4:50 p.m. David sends this to Danny August Mason. Now, if we remember the date, December 9th, is very important. I have a post on Facebook that David Crowley writes. Keep in mind now, this is the same date. And I believe this is another chess move in this high-stakes game of essentially life or death. David writes, can you believe it? The Rise is almost done. I'm serious. She's coming out to be quite the looker. Can't wait to show you all, but I have to comb her hair for a few more weeks. Remember, this is The Rise now. Nothing to do with Gray State, the project, or the feature film, or the web series. This is The Rise, the documentary. Anyway, here's the important point. I'm quite serious about giving this film away. I've come to abhor the AJ, which is Alex Jones, model of peddling DVDs as truth and cashing in on suckers. I have given this film years of my time, and I'm delighted for the opportunity to burn it down by giving it away. Hope you all share in the feeling. And so this is December 9th. Because Danny August Mason has not released and signed the release document, the entire Gray State project, the feature film with Meg or the web series, whatever it was, is on hold, and it's essentially tabled. The entire project is tabled. There's nothing they can do. They're in a holding pattern until they get this release document. Danny August Mason is refusing to sign it, so there's nothing more David can do. Now, David's spending his time, because he can't do anything on the project, by working on the final finishing touches of the documentary called The Rise. Now, he knows on December 9th when he sends this message out on Facebook. And remember, this is the Facebook post that gets deleted after the bodies are found. In the month of February 2015, this post off David Crowley's personal Facebook wall is surprisingly deleted by someone, and so he's really threatening here to give it away. Now, The Rise is a business. It's a documentary to be. The plan was to sell the documentary, TV, Netflix, cable, what have you. Now he's talking about giving it away, which means no one's going to make any money on it. And this was I think done the same time to looking for a response to see what would it take to for Danny August Mason, knowing he's serious about giving it away, and giving him the deadline of the 16th. Now we move on to the 16th. Remember in the previous post, I'd like to have your release signed document here at the bottom in yellow. I would like to have it by December 16th. And so now we get to the 16th. No response, no signed document. And we get an email on December 16th from Danny Mason, knowing it's the deadline, a nice, friendly email saying, "Buddy, please give me a call about moving forward before I sign the release form." So now I've got evidence, once again, it still isn't signed, as he states it here, that it isn't signed. This is December 16th. So it gets to be very interesting here. We know that nothing ever comes of it. This is the last communication, I believe, between these two. And it leaves us all with an awkward feeling. David was going to release The Rise for free at the end of the year. I think it was December 30th or 31st was the self-imposed deadline to release it out there for free. And then that was going to be used as promotional material to garner interest and more fan interest for when this web series or movie comes out. So he wanted to get it out there. On Christmas, he wrote The Rise, I think 5-day countdown to Christmas, and that was to get that out. So these guys are still having their email correspondence back and forth as late as the 16th of December. Now, when we go to the police investigation into this case, I pulled up the interview with Daniel August Mason done with Officer Tommy Booth from the Apple Valley Police Department. And so highlighted here, he conducts his interview on the 19th of January. Keep in mind, this is 2 days after the bodies are found. Bodies were found on Saturday the 17th. The 18th was the Sunday, and now here was Monday in January, Martin Luther King holiday. The cleaners were in there cleaning the house professionally, and also various people were in that home when they found the bullet hole in the ceiling was also on January 19th with 4 or 5 other individuals that were in the house before it was professionally cleaned and released to the family. And so we talk about Mr. Mason here doing his interview with Tommy Booth. Talks about he met him when he met David when they started doing the concept trailer, and talks about bullet exchange. And so this is the interview. Now I'm going to go to the next section. It talks in the first paragraph there that they raised about $61,000 to help do the trailer, and so they made the trailer and pitched that. Remember, the movie was never made. The funding, the movie was never produced. They were going to get the funding first and get the contract and then make the movie. Now, the second paragraph here in yellow, Mr. Mason said his involvement with Gray State and Crowley was strictly as an actor and as a friend, but had not been involved in any financing or was actually listed on any paperwork as a partner with Crowley and Heil. So what I believe this comment to be here is very deceptive. One could call it a lie, one could call it actually the truth, but what I think it is actually is deceptive. Now we know from the paperwork and the offer and the counter offers going back and forth between this release agreement that Danny August Mason was heavily involved, in fact sacrificing 4 years of his life to do this, and had ideas as being mentioned as the co-creator with the casting, the production, and the marketing of this entire project. And so he was actually in order for him to sign a release form, he had to be tied into this business in the first place. So the mere fact that he had to sign the release document shows that he was far more than just simply an actor in Gray State. Now, what Mr. Mason is telling the officer here is that he doesn't believe he's not listed on any paperwork as a partner with Crowley and Heil. Now, Mitch Heil is listed on the bullet exchange with David Crowley. And Danny August Mason is correct. He is not listed on any paperwork for the bullet exchange. He is listed on as Gray State LLC. So this is a deceptive line here to police, saying I don't have any connections from a business standpoint to that project at all. I was merely an actor. Well, that's not true. That on its face is a lie. Not involved with any financing. That also is true. He wasn't involved in any financing, but he was listed very heavily involved in the Gray State. He goes on to say in the last paragraph there that they were in attendance in August at Randy's birthday. And remember, Randy's birthday party, the documentary from Eric Nelson called A Gray State, mentions that there was some unease and it was an uncomfortable setting at Randy's birthday party in Apple Valley in August of 2014. Now that certainly would be the case because of the release statements were sent out. David had a deal that he couldn't tell anyone about, so that's why I think it was quiet and it was awkward. He also had sent out release agreement paperwork with Mitch Heil and Danny August Mason, and Mason was at the party. How uncomfortable would that be? So yes, there was some uncomfortable feelings there at that birthday party that no one really could let on. David had a deal that he didn't let on to anyone else even. Him and Comel were the only ones who knew there was a deal in place. Let's go to the next segment. Danny August Mason goes on to say in yellow highlight here, the last time Mr. Mason saw David Crowley was in September, but he could not remember the exact date in September. He goes on to say that he had come over to the Crowley's residence to talk to David concerning the movie and where the movie was heading. Then talked to David out in the driveway of the residence and stated that, quote, David had looked like he had lost a bunch of weight and was fragile. So there's two questions here that I have. We know that the release form was sent sometime in August with an August effective date, or even the end of July with an August effective date. Danny August Mason was there in attendance at the August birthday party. But after that, it appears they were on emailing correspondence only. I don't see any evidence to support that Danny August Mason went and talked to him on the driveway. This already was heading down on the end of September, down an ugly path with this counteroffer being sent and the response back to David Crowley, wanting the rights, making the demands about the Rise documentary. But feel free in the comments section of this video below, if there was proof or evidence that Danny August Mason actually went there and talked to him in the driveway. Now, the other thing, which I think is also being deceitful here from Danny Mason, is that it says David looked like he lost a bunch of weight and was fragile. This, I believe, is the first insertion of a narrative where they're trying to make the police and the detectives and the investigators think that David Crowley became unhinged, was not himself, was isolating himself, going so far here to say that he lost a bunch of weight and was fragile. This, I believe, is an outright lie. But please leave your comments below. This is, I think this is planting the seed for the investigators to think, you know what, maybe David did do this. Now, the next section here in the police interview, they talk about after the September meeting, which I don't believe ever took place. Mason states that he received an email on the 1st of October from the attorney. The email was asking Mason to release any rights he had, on, and he said he wanted to review it with his attorney before he signed anything. That very well could be true. I don't think Danny August Mason had any intention of signing that, regardless if he had an attorney look at it or not. Now he says that on December 7th, he received an email directly from Crowley, stating that he decided to take it in a different path, and he needed to sign a release form. And attached was that release form from October 1st. He said he needs his attorney to look it over. And, quote, in yellow, December 7th was the last contact Mr. Mason had with David Crowley or anyone in his family. Now, we know that's not true. The last contact was December 16th of 2014 from Danny Mason to David Crowley. So December 7th, last contact is outright lie. Now, the very last paragraph here gets into more of the cunning, more of the psychological deceit here from Danny August Mason. During the interview with police, Mr. Mason then asks the officer, Tommy Booth, asked me if I had talked to Mitch Heil yet concerning David Crowley. So now he's steering the conversation. He's basically done with talking about himself, and then quickly steers the conversation to the other business partner named Mitch Heil. I advised him that I had not, and Mr. Mason was kind enough to give me his phone number so that he can contact him. He says he believed that they dissolved their partnership and ended on good terms. That's true, and that happened in September, October of 2014. That also is true. I think that was either August or even September. Certainly wasn't October. They had the garage sale already in September. So that is, for the most part, true. But watch how Danny Mason is steering the conversation with the investigator onto other topics. Here he goes out of his way to focus the attention on Mitch Heil and essentially wrap up the interview. Mr. Mason then goes on to describe Crowley as a very loving man towards his family. He was in the military, didn't know what belief system he had, and goes out of his way to leave the door open for any further contacts by telling him he could contact him with any further questions. What a nice guy. Now, the interesting thing is here, we have Mr. Mason's interview recorded on the digital recorder and downloaded to the secure server at the Apple Valley Police Department. That would be something interesting to get the FOIA request for that interview, whether it's for this case or on the Crowley investigation case, or later if police were to pursue charges of lying here to investigators. That certainly is recorded and saved on the server, as there's various lies here by Danny August Mason directly to investigators. That's the update for today. It's the Crowley case updates, November 24th of 2018. The curious case of Danny August Mason. Please leave your comments below. Thanks for listening.
Are you interested in the paranormal? Murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.